And welcome to yet another episode of Uncarcerated. I'm Lee Scott.
Kevin Scott.
And we have hands down the most accomplished guest we have ever had or will ever have on this show. This is it. We probably won't do another show after this.
We're fucking blowing it.
This is, yeah.
Yeah.
Good job, Kevin.
Yeah, all downhill from here. Great. Great.
So for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'd like you to read Jhody's bio.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. So we are very, very fortunate to have Jhody Polk here today. And so I'll just read Jhody's bio and then we can get into her amazing story. So Jhody Polk, the Alchemist, is the founder and president of the Legal Empowerment and Advocacy Hub, LEA. LEA is the first participatory defense hub in the state of Florida and the home of the National Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative, JLI. She is the former director of community justice at the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding. Jhody is known for her work as a Central Florida organizer on Amendment 4, a campaign to store voting rights to over 1.5 million Floridians with felony convictions. She is the recipient of the 2019 Peace Builder of the Year Award and the 2020 Dr. Martin Luther King's Jr. Legacy Award, the fourth person in the state of Florida to be named a Soros Justice Fellow in 2018. Jhody serves on the board of Community Spring and NAMADI. She served as the director of the Alachua County Reentry Coalition from 2017 to 2020, and is the founder of the Florida Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. She is the owner of A Light in the Valley LLC and is a rising tarot reader, astrologer, and energy healer. Jhody Polk unapologetically lives for Black power and liberation and is a strong advocate for human rights, legal empowerment, and community peace building. She is a proud member of NAMADI, the National Justice Impacted Bar Association, the National Lawyers Guild, and Justice Defenders.
Yes.
Welcome, Jhody. Welcome to Uncarcerated.
When did you know that your life's purpose was to make everyone else look bad?
Yeah, I feel so bad about myself right now.
Okay, that's amazing. What an amazing, like, that's
I'm happy if I made a
amazing.
sandwich during the day.
That's,
you know,
that's sincerely, like,
so great.
So I've known Jhody for a few years, but to like read that out like that was like really all the more impressive, knowing the kind of person you are separately away from everything I just read, and then to kind of couple those two things together to like see the reality of your accomplishments, you know, in some of these, there's more, but like amazing. Anyway, Jhody Polk.
Thank you. I used to get surprised. Like I would go on speaking engagements and people would read my bio and then I'd be like hearing it for the first time, like, oh shit. But hearing you read it then, like, that's me. So it's actually one of the first times like total alignment. But that's me.
That's you. Yeah. I wish you would do something.
I'm not doing nothing. Like I have permission to do nothing. Nothing. Yes.
I guess the best place to start is from the beginning. How did you get involved with this kind of work? Like what when did you know this was going to be what you wanted to do with your life and got inspired and felt passionate to give voice to voiceless people?
So for me, it really started at Lowell while I was in prison. You know, going to prison when I was 23 in 2007, I unlearned everything that I knew, and my life like truly began when I was incarcerated. And I was a jailhouse lawyer. I was a law clerk. And I was so proud, like my identity as a law clerk, as a jailhouse lawyer. And so I knew I wanted to be a lawyer before I came home. It was like my number one goal. And so it kept me alive. Like I actually wanted to go back, part of my story is I wanted to go back to prison like for many years after being out. And so I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer, came home, immediately started the education route, working towards school. And I was up one night Googling lawyers in Florida that had a criminal record, because as I started getting higher in college, they started telling me stuff like, you're not going to University of Florida, or like, so you want to do business, right? I'm like, no, I want to be a lawyer. And then so that's when I started hearing right out of college, like it's probably not going to happen. So I started looking for people, and I found Veronica Lemia. She was a lawyer with a background. It was very similar to mine. I reached out to her. And I just needed somebody to tell me, reaffirm me that, yes, I could. Like now it's probably like 3 years out, 2 years out. And she'd gone to law school with Desmond Meade. So didn't care about voting rights, none of that stuff back then, to be honest with you. She connected us, gave me some tips, like start building community around you. You know, my community was people inside incarceration. Like that was my community. It was the first time I like thinking about community outside. And I met Desmond. And then I started learning about Amendment 4, democracy, advocacy, started getting involved with some local, you know, organizers. And sure enough, it all started lining up. So I quit my job right after the campaign, was hired by the River Phoenix Center for Peace Building. I was a peace builder before I was a justice defender. I have to say that I'm very proud that I bring peace and justice together. And then that next year, someone told me about the Soros Fellowship, never heard about Soros. I was in Boston being trained to come back and do participatory defense because I wanted, my brother's doing 30 years in prison. Everybody I know has life, these long sentences. So this was like participatory defense. When I heard about it, like we have to have that in Florida. Like this is going to be a post-conviction hub. And so 3 people on Boston like, you should apply for Soros. Like, what is that? And someone else said it. And I wrote the proposal like 45 minutes before the deadline.
Hell yeah.
And it was like the only thing I could think to do, because the only other thing I want to do was law school. Yeah. And then like the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative was so important. I was a jailhouse lawyer. It was like my story. It was like all of our story. So I wrote the Soros Fellowship for us, for jailhouse lawyers, hands down, got it. And I mean, from there, it has just been discovery and leaning in, pulling out. Yeah, I've literally walked into it.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of, because I at the beginning part of that, that you had a mentor, you had somebody who was kind of holding a torch on the path in front of you. Did you find anybody like that while you were inside?
So when I got out, and I had a plan, I did everything they tell you to do. Like I've been determined to be successful. When I was in there, all I had was me. And so like, I learned to love myself. Like I was doing this, I was going to live. So came home, I had a job in 30 days. I had my kids in 24 hours. I got married. I was in college. Like I was uptight, like really uptight, you know, I was going to pull myself up by my bootstraps, like for real. Yeah. And that shit was like, I was doing all this amazing stuff, but on the inside, I was empty. I was lost. I was confused. I felt like I was fitting into a storyline. Like, oh my, this can't be real. I would have rather have been back in prison where it was real, you know, versus being out here where I just felt like I was putting on. And so I'll never forget, like, on the outside, I look, and people think I'm a goody two shoes. I'm so normal and human. Like, I am, Kevin. And you will probably like know that the most. Of course, yeah. And I'll never forget, like, I'd be breaking this shit in my house. I'd get off from work, doing some amazing volunteering, coming home, like, cursing at my kids, jumping on my husband, physically abusive, like, consistently saying I wanted to go back. And I'll never forget, his name is Casey Walpole. So he taught Zen, MBSR, mind body stress reduction. My great friend Kelly Lumadou, she's serving life. She dragged me into these classes. And so when I got out, and then I remember he said something like, if you're thinking it and saying it, it's just a matter of time before you're doing it. And at that point, it was like, I got to stay free. Like before, I was my biggest mentor. I can honestly say, like in prison, there was a lot of people that inspired me, but in there, I really learned to look up to myself. Nice. But when I came out, I remember what Casey said. At that moment, I had to choose, am I going back? And I wanted to stay out, you know, I at least wanted to try. And so I reached out to Casey, you know, and so he was like, I would say one of my first mentors, also Bennett Brummer. Was at Gainesville for All meeting. Yes, he's a former, like, he was talking, I didn't even know he was a lawyer. He's a retired public defender from Miami-Dade. And he's talking, I'm like looking at him like, oh, I want him. I walked up to him like, you have something for me that I want. And ended up, who would know, he was a lawyer, PD. He was my mentor, Andy Bachman, who's the pastor at United Church of Gainesville, Jeffrey Weisberg, who's all white men for some reason. I promise, George Whiteman.
They're the worst.
I know, but they
Yeah,
love
fucking
me.
are the worst.
And I chose them. I'm like honorary people though. So,
Yeah.
but I had
Yeah, you
several mentors along the way.
I want to talk a little bit about that idea. It's a little abstract, but that I have felt this before because when I was in prison, I taught a bunch of classes. I started off helping people get their GEDs, and because I was doing that, they were like, you could have free run of the education building. So I designed programs at Lottie, like wrote the curriculum for it, used stuff like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and created classes. And when I got home, I didn't have any of that. I didn't have community. I wasn't teaching. I wasn't mentoring. And so that idea that I was somebody inside and I'm nobody when I come home, that's such a steep drop off, not to mention the fact that you have connection. You know, you have some of your best friends are still in there.
Still in that.
So you come home and you're totally alone and you're nobody. And so even if you're, got the job and you reconnect with your kids and stuff, a lot of that stuff rings hollow. Can you talk a little bit about that feeling and how maybe how it affects people without them knowing about it?
Because as a mom, and when I was arrested and brought, I was 23, my daughter was 5 months old, my son had just turned 2. It was literally 2 months after my 23rd birthday. And I had been working, did not really have that bond with them. So let's be honest, I did 7 off of 8. I come back home, these kids are 7 and 9. My parents, like my mom, I was the primary caretaker. So my mom, how could she just now get the money, the resources, come and see me? So I didn't get a lot of letters, didn't get a lot of connection. And so I know just because I birthed them, it was like, I'm aware that these are my kids. They've always been a part of my plan. But coming home, I'll never forget, there was for a couple years of feeling some resentment towards even just having the kids. I only learned how to take care of myself. And for the first time, I now had my life back. There are a lot, and I know a lot of people are afraid to admit that, but I had a lot of selfish moments of did I ask, especially did I ask for this?
You stepped back into a life that wasn't yours.
It really wasn't my own, certain stuff. And so I had to build this relationship. Sometimes we just act emotions and family, these bonds are just natural, but it's not. So that was a big one for me. I'm just now, I think this past year, oh my God, I identify as a mom. I have my own practice. Me and my kids have our own relationship. I could not do everything the way everybody else was doing it, holidays, even especially it was totally different. Yeah.
I know one of the things that we've talked about before, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, your practice of unlearning. I've heard you say that word several times since I've known you. And then you even mentioned it here, about when you went into prison, you were unlearning the old whatever that was. And then I'm sure and then kind of when you got out too, I'm doing all the right things, I'm checking all the right boxes, they told me to do this and I'm fucking doing all that. But then you had to sort of okay, that's not it, because, so I need to unlearn that as well. Do you think that and maybe you could talk about this, the spiritual practices that you sort of came to discover while you were inside that carried through to the outside, how did that play into your process of unlearning, and how does it still show up in your life now? As you as you're sort of unlearning identity and getting to know you, and that sort of practice of minusing, how does that show up for you?
So it shows up as a reflection of me, all over the place, and I'll never forget, I come from a Christian background, I guess. And so I inhaled the Bible when I got into county and did everything it said. And so I'll never forget when I still got 8 years, shit doesn't work, and threw it down.
See that happen many times.
Let's be honest, this doesn't work. And so I get to prison, and the advice that I got, my cousin worked at the prison. She was like, stay away from the chapel girls. They be the worst. Stay away from the people in the chapel. So I'll never forget when I went to prison, my spirituality really started with inner conversations. When you wake up and the drugs are gone, the family's gone, the kids are gone, and you have nothing but you, there's this inner dialogue. So it started with this dialogue and in the inside. And then I started seeking. So I sit with Buddhists, I sat with Jehovah's Witnesses. That's a good thing too about I hate to say it's a good thing about being in prison, but because the chapel was this space, you know, where people could come in. I mean, I was with bikers, I was with just people from all walks of faith. And then our chaplain, we got a Jewish guy, and he started talking about the Torah. And so after learning now on the outside and coming back, and I always practice anything I learn, kind of bring it in and then practice it. And so I learned to take care of myself. I started recognizing that I had this voice. While I was in the county jail, it was the first time I heard my voice, my thoughts. I signed up for psych. Like, there's this voice, and it sounds like me. I did not recognize in a dialogue. Yeah.
Because you had to shut it off for so long?
I think
Listening to the noise out here, you really drown out your inner voice. You're not sitting still. Yeah.
you don't have it. I've been taking care of my mom since I was 14. Like, my mom's my kid. My brothers, I'm the oldest, so I've always like took care of, you know, my family, surviving Gainesville, my first prison, surviving elementary, middle, and high school, my second prison, like surviving in his body. So to get in there, it was like, and then it was in prison. I was like, in addition to like my voice, there's this other voice, because they all sound alike, but they're different. And so that was the first time I tapped into something higher than myself, and then also being self-aware. Like, the wind could blow, or you know what I'm saying? Like, stuff's happening, and I'm always paying attention. And that's when I started picking up this thread that there was something greater than me. And I started having these conversations. So to be honest, I was like, by the time I came out, I'll never forget, like, I always been afraid of hell. Like, this is my probably third prison, like going to hell. And I had these things, like I got married immediately. I was not gonna have sex. I was not gonna sin. Doesn't it? So, but I came out, and then I started to learn that there was nothing that I could do that was going to stop me from being Jhody. Like, people hear my bio, I had a lot of like, it was a ride. It was a dark ride along the way. So even as I was cursing out my kids, as I was letting people down, flaking, and my wife used to know me, I'm sorry. Like, it's for the process. Like, like, sometimes
My bad.
it really kind of came down to it. And then I'll never forget seeing you. One day we were at the CMC, and it was just like zen, like it was, you had this aura around you, and I'll never forget. It was really life changing again for me. And then that's when I recognized, like, because I pieced myself back together and really created who I was inside, I could also do that with my spirituality. So, like, I'm very cult-like. I am very, my spirituality is really my inner dialogue, my inner practice, my inner God. Yeah. It's not one little thing.
No, yeah, I feel like you definitely have like your own, almost like your own ism.
It is.
Like you have your own way of being. It's so wonderful because it is like you can see
Tao of Jhody.
for real Jodyism. Yeah, there's like you can see like there is like a little bit of that, a little bit of this, but like none of them are like distinctly that thing. It's like gone through the filter of you and like your life experience and like what works for you. It's really lovely.
We're all connected in one. So, like, we hear these narratives and stories, but I've been able to witness that it's true. Yeah, I can't lose.
That's beautiful.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience while you were in prison? Obviously, you worked your way into the law clerk position.
Did it?
Which, by the way, can you dispel some myths I've had? I had the worst experiences with the law clerks when I was in prison. To me, I knew that every once in a while you got one that loved you and wanted to fight for you and was going to do the actual work. I actually did a little bit of time with a guy who was a lawyer in St. Pete, big time lawyer, ended up getting like 10 years, and he was a really good law clerk and he trained some people to do some good work. But I thought it was one of the bigger hustles because you're selling someone hope. And if you don't deliver, and you may even have good intentions, but you know there's so many roadblocks. Can you talk a little bit about taking that responsibility on and doing it, with genuineness,
Yes.
which is not a word. I just made that up.
It's good. It's good to do that in space. Yeah. So, and honestly, I would say, Jhody Polk initiative, I think 98% of my membership are men. And I've learned that there's such a huge difference between men prison and women prison. But like, honestly, the AAC was knowing I was gonna become a law clerk. They all I had life sentences, like they never, and I remember getting there. And in Florida, we had the 60-day motion. Nobody told me about that when we get in prison. Arnold, telling you, who went down. You know, that's 6 days, right? You go through this motion, library. They're very, I'm gonna say, like, very, I remember going with, stairs, I like it, like, afternoon. And to me, like, can you answer my question? So like, especially like, really help me. And so, like, they I do it better. And they I was so shocked. I woke up one like wake me up to where I was away from home. And I was and so I was going to the library, and it was a private prison. I was going to the library like every day, love to read. And it's John says the library. That's the library. She just started noticing, and then asked questions. I started like my girls were counter, and there was a position she locked her. And so she was the one that put in, and I really not asking with my time. I would never lock her. And so even though shot types it was bad. Were not, and they did. Like information. I want to be my others. I was doing it where I got a blue. I'm starting to read, helping study for E. And so I was. It's like my training went the way from being a doctor. So it's really all kind of been pushing like y'all coming to this. And when I went back to my therapist, like gas, and came along, that's information that to low and went in big dog swinging. Membership. One thing I'm proud of myself was I always thought like write your story out and curse words in it, even write your shit out like always there. I was great at research. I was people how to research, and then like he just approached like I was never because I'm guilty. I did like and that was this week challenge motivation, and I had this. No, I did it. You know what I'm saying? Way that like I can never take that off. You need to give people that freedom and then surround. But hope you know that if in an event you can be able to. I just really treat people the way that I want to be treated. Yeah. So now that I've been out, I do recognize that for the women, we don't like they probably just shitty to like sell hope or whatnot or whatever. But I love the fact that they see the power. Can't sell a product or, you know, and that's a lot of something that's not valuable. To see the value in the law, see the power in the law, there's nobody there, you know, giving mentorship, inspiring, you know, like no one there. So the men just get left with this power, and then the women been stripped away from it. My gift is I can turn that into something. Like I took that into prison. So I recognize how when you can't help yourself, how can I expect you to help me? I'm sitting here and I can't even help myself. So that's why I'm at least proud of the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative. I think jailhouse lawyers are such an important link. When we talk about abolition, like we can't even have that conversation if we're not talking about the position and the power of jailhouse lawyers, you know, and what we can do. And so I do look at not just what is, but what can be. And I'm proud to be like at least doing what I can to like make sure that they have what they need, so we don't be like that.
Yeah. I mean, it really is the link, because when that gavel bangs and you get sent up the road, you're forgotten about by anybody that was helping you, you know, any public defender, anybody that was helping you. That's the link. The only ability to get back in court does come from inside.
Or to learn law. It was in the law library that I learned for the first time, like, oh shit, like the law. When we talk about justice, we just talk about the criminal justice. I never knew how much the law actually affected my day-to-day life. Like even just being in prison and having rules, like you really become aware, like when you're in your isolated neighborhood and community, you know, nobody, especially if you, my mom was always on housing and stuff like that. So you just sign a little paper. We don't interact with law and policy. And so even like for, you know, definitely helping people in the legal sense. But one of the things I love about being a law clerk was that also helping people to see the law as this tangible, real thing. So even as I've come home, there's been a lot of blocks and barriers. There still is, even with that bio. But because I understand that the law is tangible and real, and because like I am a part of the law, like I'm not just a criminal. What does it mean to be a citizen? What does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be a community member? Like that gives me this power, you know, and expectation. So law clerks are some of our first teachers of not just like the law, but like democracy, citizenship.
When you were talking about, I can't remember her name, so we're just going to call her Jolly Rancher. When Jolly Rancher Jones was talking to you, and she didn't.
Sorry, Miss Jones.
Sorry, J.R. Jones. So when she was not blowing smoke up your ass, when she was giving you like, sorry, it's not going to happen. It sounds like that was like satisfying on some level, because it was like, at least this is giving me knowledge. This is giving me some sort of like engagement with like the reality of what's happening, and knowing later as you turn that around to like other people, to give that empowerment to other folks, to be like, here's what's happening. This otherwise mysterious system, which can be like overwhelming and intimidating and oftentimes just sort of like run people over. No, you're pausing it, like here's what's going on, giving people information, giving them that empowerment, and then knowing that when you got home, you started LEA, the Legal Empowerment Advocacy Hub.
Yes.
I wonder like if you could talk about that experience of what Jolly Rancher gave you, that like sense of like, okay, like here's some truth, here's some like reality, here's what's going on, and then like turning that into like, how will I give that to the next person? How did that process happen? Like, when did you decide I'm going to turn this for other people? And then how did you bring that home in the form of LEA?
And I love the early part of that question too. The acceptance. The acceptance is what allows you to get any type of freedom in there. The acceptance of your case, the acceptance I got to be on this storm. Where I learned radical acceptance was in prison.
Yeah, this is what's happening.
Yeah,
this is what's happening.
This is what's happening.
Yeah.
And steps in truth. Because when she first told me, it was like, and I noticed like most people right then and there would have just walked away, and it hurt in that moment. And I remember like not really going back into the law library. There was no other reason for me to go in there, which I don't think that's true anymore. Like to me, that's the most restorative space that we have, that law library. So I remember leaving from there, and then I did not readdress it again until I got into now as a trainee at Gaston, you know, a couple weeks later. I'm in the law library. So as a trainee, the only thing I really could research was my own case. And so even though she said no, like I remember, so I heard what she said, at least I identified. And I think to me, it reminds me of the restorative process of like, first of all, what's the problem? And so like they were the problem, but like this problem of I'm here with 8 years, what am I going to do? Like it was this internal thing. But once I started going through, it was then reading the law. Like I started reading the West Digest, looking at the floor. Like it was the first time I even seen the elements of my crime. Like now a person get arrested, the first thing we tell them to do is like, look at the elements of the crime. Like this happened. Also, I had to be honest, like there was not a lot of evidence, but like I honestly done it. It was the first time I even thought about this is what I did. This is the impact, like actually put myself in my crime.
It was like you were watching a movie of your own life.
And it was a movie. Right. I literally committed my crimes. First time really in trouble. Using like shit that I learned from a movie when I was like 10. So my life, it really felt like a movie. Right. And I'll never forget like thinking about.
Was it the Muppets caper?
It was South Central.
Oh,
with OG Bobby John. Yes, it was South Central. I went to steal this car. Couldn't like literally think about little OG Bobby Johnson. Couldn't steal the car and had to go in and take the keys. Like it was real, Yeah. So when I saw the elements, and then I saw that I always respected the law for some reason. The law said that if it was a second degree felony, it was between boom and boom. If it was first degree, it was like. I just appreciate it, especially my life has always been like this. To me, the law gave me some boundaries. The first time I ever learned boundaries was probably like the law.
Yeah.
So when I saw and I was able, it was like math, like, okay, A, B, and C, like all of that was like, damn, 8 went pretty bad considering, and that was my own personal, case. So once I had that, I could see other people coming in. What I didn't want was, from Ms. Jones was that gap in between. So the gap from talking to her and then actually getting in West Digest and then getting that acceptance, like there was a lot of emotional turmoil. Yeah. So when people would come into the law library, I just wanted to, let's get on a foundation of like the reality, here, like what's real. Like I would never tell people what the problems were. Like tell me what you think the issues are. I never wrote a ground for somebody. And I know there's a lot of law clerks, we just take in the story and go do the work. Like, nah, and I guess that's why participatory defense, when you think about it now, I was doing participatory methods inside, like I'm here to assist you.
Just like instinctually.
Yes.
You just sort of naturally arrived at that.
Because I don't like people depending on me. That's my Scorpio ways. Like, they're like, I don't depend, commit. So it really was self-discovery, but also a practice.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then so when you came home, and how is that like showing up now, like in the form of like Leah and like participatory defense on the street as opposed to like inside?
So PD, I want to be a lawyer, and I actually want to be a prosecutor. I'm gonna be honest. Enough people like
get up.
I wanted to be a prosecutor, and people would be like, "Why did you want power?" And it's like, no, I wanted to represent the most people that I could. And to me, like the state prosecutors represent the state. And like, I wanted to represent people. Like, to me, it was almost like the public defenders, it looked like prosecutors was doing something. And I've always like, how could we balance it out? Like, justice is balanced. Like, we should be on any place that, it has space. Right. We should be there. I've always felt that way.
We need good people in all of the positions. Right. That is true.
Until abolitionists, till we get away with it. Like, I mean, come on, let's fuck it up. But
until we get away with it.
Until we get what we want. But when I came home, wanting to be a lawyer isolated me from my community. I even learned how like success, like most people to get successful, you gotta grow out and away from your community. And so like becoming a lawyer, trying to get into UF, like it put me in white spaces, like with a lot of great people, but I wasn't with my people.
Right.
And so when I joined the National Council for Incarcerated, formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, I met them a week after I met Desmond Meade, the Florida Rights Restoration. First time they flew me to New York for a convenient. LaShawna Tyson, she was the canteen orderly. She was badass. I looked up to her in prison, and I didn't know she was out, and she was with the FRRC. I saw her there,
Oh, wow.
and she was hooked up with the National Council. And so someone couldn't go, and they invited me like off the cuff. I wasn't supposed to be there. And then they were doing participatory defense, which we hadn't heard about in Florida. And so this was even like, they were telling me I couldn't practice law, but like this was a community, you know, of people that were not lawyers, but were with people, you know, teaching the law. Like this to me was like the jailhouse lawyers space when you get out. You know, it was like the only space that I felt like I could be me inside of that space.
Yeah.
So participatory defense, and Leah was honestly the jailhouse lawyers initiative. Like I never wanted to do a nonprofit or none of that shit. I just wanted to go to law school. I swear that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so with the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative, when we I got trained, and they were like, okay, what's the name of your participatory defense hub? And so I could have, looking back, made it, I guess, the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative, but I got a chance to go to Budapest and learned about legal empowerment, NAMATI. I heard about this group, NAMATI, the Global Legal Empowerment Network. Someone sent me a flyer and was like, you should go. It was like in a whole other country with the lawyers, but I applied. And so somehow they reached out to me. Someone couldn't go after the decisions had been made.
Oh, wow.
Someone could. I'm so glad you called. Thank you.
I vampired it. I vampired it.
I hate that you called.
You better So legal empowerment. It was literally, I got my passport, violent offender, passport. They were like, you can go if you can get a passport right before Thanksgiving. Got that passport, went to Budapest. And it was people from all like 10 different countries. I was the only formerly incarcerated person there, the only non-legal person. And it was the first time I saw justice in a full spectrum. In the US, it's like criminal justice, abolition. There, it was like civil justice, human rights, economic. It was the first time I'd seen even peace and justice in the same space. And there, like legal empowerment, community organizing is legal empowerment. Never seen that. So the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative was like, Leah, I needed a hub name for participatory defense. And then I learned about legal empowerment. And to me, I've been doing that as a jailhouse lawyer. And so that's how Leah formed. And then it became the home of participatory defense, the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative. So it was a way for me to bring all of me, the legal part of me, into one umbrella.
Hey, you know, hearing you talk about like, you almost had to create spaces to do what you wanted to do, you know, being a couple of white men, you know, Kevin and I faced challenges coming home, as all felons do. We don't face nearly the challenges because of white privilege. We don't face any of the stuff that a Black man or a Black woman faces. And can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges, not only facing discrimination and challenges and not being able to get into certain doors, but then once you get into certain doors, being in a white space, not having community, not feeling connected. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges you faced coming home as a Black woman, which, by the way, like do most of the shit in this country and take the most shit in this country, if I could say so?
I had to learn that. Like, and this is one story, because it's different. And I've honestly felt more isolated in the formerly incarcerated community than I have in my white community. Like, to be honest with you, our Say Yes to Second Chances, which were the little hubs that were geared towards getting Amendment 4. These were like retired people from the University of Florida. It was like white folks were really pushing Amendment 4. And then being in college, you know, because I would always, even my probation officer, I made them like a resource, like, look, you're gonna love me, you're gonna hear me, like these are my goals. I've had to learn to make nothing out of something. So when I went to work for the River Phoenix Center for Peace Building, also just being in the college space, and then once I kind of started with the advocacy, I honestly loved because there were a lot of things that I unlearned. Like I need to learn how to eat again. You know, I only knew like what my mom cooked. Like I only knew, like I didn't even know like what I liked
Yeah.
anymore.
We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like I didn't know what clothes I wore anymore. I didn't know what my sizes were.
Yeah.
I knew I wore blue.
Yeah, what do I like?
That's it.
What do I actually like?
Yeah.
I know what I've been fed.
Right.
But what do I actually like to make
And I knew
digest? And yeah,
I knew what I liked before I went to prison. I was a whole different person when I came home.
Whole other person.
Yeah.
So like white folks opened up the community to me. Andy Bachman, I mean, they opened up those doors, the ACLU, and it was just like, I was Jhody there, and they was okay with me being Jhody. Working at the River Phoenix Center for Peace building, like race obviously comes in. I remember being like, I'm not talking about that. Like, I don't even have no race issues. This is where I really was like when I first came out. Like I never even thought about race. I did not even, it was working on the campaign that I started recognizing like, oh shit, like this is about Selma. Like this is about MLK. Like that was even the Black History Month. Like all of it started coming together. I didn't even know what elected officials did. Like I learned about the mayor, the city commissioner. I did not know we elected. And this is a law clerk coming home wanting to be a lawyer. I did not know that the public defender, state attorney, like no sense. Like when you're in an isolated, and that's why like we say marginalized, disenfranchised, like I never identified as none of that shit. Like, have I been isolated in Gainesville? Yes. If you only have blue and black crayons, I mean, your picture's gonna look a little blue and black, right? And so like, yeah. And then we live in the South. Like once I started traveling, I was like, oh my God, I put it into context. Like this shit just is not right. But like at first it wasn't like race and things like that. Like I just like being reflected as me. Yeah. When they asked me to share my story for the first time on the campaign of incarceration, and I started telling my story really for the first time, the community that was hearing it, which was white, they all come into these spaces to hear these stories. They will always treat me then as, it was almost like, again, I'm rewriting my story. Like whatever I share, however I showed up, they saw that because they didn't know me. And so they responded to me. So like, it was actually the white community where I practiced really trying on my identity, being myself, stepping out. And they really embraced that. And then it was like really into my peace building career that I really started to see race. I think with my kids too, like to be honest, with my kids being in the school system, I was like, oh shit. And even the statistics of the first time I seen 13th, right here at the Civic Media Center, I shared it. And I'm like, it really started that bootstrap. Like, because to me, I was a felon. Like, I had done so much wrong. Like, I really believed that I deserved everything that I'd gone through. Like, it was my responsibility. And so once I kind of started seeing, like, I'm amazing, but like my community is kind of lacking, it just shift, the perspective. But for me coming home, my greatest challenges were housing. Like even people have no idea, as a Soros fellow, like I couldn't get a decent place.
It's crazy
to live. I just now have affordable, safe housing. Also family. Like when you come back, people only remember you for who you used to be.
Yep.
There are a lot of expectations, especially being a primary caretaker. Like you come home, it's like people got some expectations, like, so those were like family, parenting, and just having like that community. When I joined the formerly incarcerated community was very isolating. I have to I was gonna be honest, coming here. And so for me, I'd rather kind of be with a diverse community. Like I really do. I love connecting with people that are like me, but I'm not just, like formally incarcerated. So it's been like twofold for me. Like the National Lawyers, they're my people, they treat me as I show up, it's
insane to me that the housing issue, this is a perfect example, because they make it so difficult for you to get safe, affordable housing, really for everybody. And then when you have a felony, it gets even worse. So, but here's an example of somebody who has a list of accomplishments, a mile long, who is making their community better, way better than somebody else who just moved up here from Miami. I'm going to be here for a year. I can go get an apartment.
You should be fighting to have this be your neighbor.
Yeah, this is exactly who you want to be your neighbor.
Yeah.
It's like we throw all logic out the window when we're talking about
the money
housing.
side of it. Like, it's expensive when you don't have safe, affordable. Like, because I had to go through like private owners, stuff like that. I still help people. Like, I would be spending $1,300 for rent, a month, and like I can't afford that, but it's the only place I could live. And I've seen how many other people have come home, and then we put ourselves in these opportunities to fail. But it's almost like, that's when I started seeing like this shit's kind of intentional. Like, I give everybody like the benefit of the doubt, like even the system.
Right. This seems strategic.
This seems a little strategic.
This is fucking working well for somebody. Yeah, there's like that horrible situation of like you mentioned, like extra expectations. People kind of like watching you, like you're like expected to be like next level human being, like superhuman almost in your like ability to like generate money and get housing and be a parent and run this organization and do that. But also we're kind of waiting for you to fuck up, and we're looking for the old Jhody to show up. And like, you're supposed to like achieve 1,000 things, but your opportunity to achieve anything is diminished because of like your record. So it's hard to find a job, hard to find housing. So it's like the math gets really far apart, like expectations and then like ability to like achieve things.
Because people would see me traveling, like I still had a job. So if I took off to travel, I was actually taking off.
You're missing money.
The first nonprofit, like I was working to take care of the nonprofit. Like I got the office, I was doing all the advocacy. I was still going to work and paying for it. Even when I got the Soros Fellowship, it was like I still had the Florida Council. Thank God, well, that Latasha took that on, but I was still like really paying out of pocket to like furnish or to really create my dream. And so nobody taught me about money. Nobody taught me about business as well. And then being Black, being a woman, being formerly incarcerated, you feel this pressure of, because you know how fucked up it is, you feel this pressure of I should make it better. Like I have to, do it, especially when you don't see it happening. Like once I seen what's happening out of Florida, there was no way I could sleep at night and not try to make some ripple effects in Florida. But I mean, no one teaches you how to do a nonprofit. It's like, go out there and create justice, but how do you do that? So relationships have been everything I've accomplished and done. It's been because of a relationship. Somebody walking with me, holding a hand, opening the door, making a phone call. Like it's been very spiritual. Yeah.
How do we create in a perfect world? How do we create an army of Jhodys? Like, how do we create people that are coming home? And Kevin and I have talked about it before. There's so much shame and so much embarrassment from the prison experience itself, not to mention the bridges you've burned. And then the last few people that were with you maybe have died or moved on or hooked up with other people. You come home alone and you don't share your story. That's one of the reasons we started this show, is to create that space to share your story. So there's people not sharing their stories. There's people not talking about what's going on inside there or how they were coerced into taking a plea in the first place. It ends up becoming all of this silence surrounds all of this abuse. How do we influence people to come home and use their voice?
I think by normalizing success. I was just having a question or a conversation with somebody, one of my dear friends, and was talking about like generationally, like when you start talking about diabetes, you start talking about like everything's like my mama did that. It's like we normalize depression and like the narrative of what a formerly incarcerated person goes through. Like I learned about statistics in prison, and I never forget being like, I'm not going to be a statistic. Like also learning about data has just been life-changing for me. But like really like recognizing that I'm a part of like the world. So for me, that's why you say it makes it hard, because when you start to shine, it does kind of cause, offense. And there have been so many times that I felt like,
I'm
yeah,
offended by your shine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because there's so much going
Sure.
on in the world, even
What
with
the fuck?
participatory defense. Families are coming in and they're going through real shit. But I'm also, for me, like, I get excited that I wash my dishes and clean my house. Like, it really be the small things for me. But I feel like we have to, like, the stories that we do have success. My success is not just those things. My success is that, like, I also was able to just like heal, navigate it. I worked through some shitty jobs and went through some shitty things, but like I also overcame it. Like I finally do have, a place. I brought a car, the car that I did have, like I was leasing a car and like gave it back during the pandemic. That was tough, for me, like keeping my home clean. I didn't grow up in a house where everything was like clean all the time. So like coming home from prison and just being a clean person, like no matter, even though we moved twice, 3 times every year, every last one of those places were clean. Like I really pat myself on the back. I could have never believed I would have done all of that shit. But like some of the things I had to practice belief and faith, of just being a good person, apologizing to my kids, when I was wrong, like fighting for my kids. And so like, to me, it's like really celebrating who you are. Like those are just experiences, that I've had, but who I am every day, all the time, like no matter if I'm in prison, county, jail, Florida, New York, anywhere, like I'm me. So I think it's like that foundational piece of I am power, I am valuable, I am the tool, like I'm the fucking resource. So like no matter where I go, I can make it better.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the things like I've loved about you and respected about you for a while, but I think hearing you like kind of tell some of your stories sitting here is amazing. And maybe I'm wrong. I could be putting this together in totally the wrong way. But like you're Jhody, the person who's running and gunning in the street. That's kind of like how you're living. You go to prison. You're Jhody, the prisoner. Now you're Jhody, the person who's kind of hearing this other voice maybe for the first time. Like, oh, like there's something there in me. And then like now I'm Jhody, the law trainee. And then like now you're Jhody, the law clerk, and you come home and you're Jhody, the Leah person, and you're the River Phoenix person. And but like sort of like as that identity is changing, this voice inside you seems like it's like almost like getting like louder as you're like getting to know more of like, what do I like to eat? Like who am I separate from all this stuff? Like your you-ness seems like it's like sort of like crescendoing as like you're like going through these other identities, and maybe almost like those are like almost like quieting. I've always respected how you're like when you take a step back from like all that stuff, I'm like always like, oh, that's like really admirable, because I feel like you're like really following your true self. And I feel like one of the amazing things about your story is that you're like kind of like instead of like totally buying into like all of your identity roles, really what's happening is like you're really getting to know yourself more, and because of that you're sort of like turning that into like compassion for others, and like sort of naturally arising out of your like self-acquaintance is like love for the world, while also still like loving yourself and getting to know yourself more, if that makes any sense.
I had to learn to love. I could not give anybody nothing I don't have for myself. Like, and I think to do that is like suffering. Like I'll never forget, if I don't remember anything from like Buddhist, was like I create my own suffering. Like that stuck with me. Now I read The Secret, was like, wherever you are, like you manifest, I'm throwing that shit on my locker. Like that's some BS. And then a year later, but compassion. I was temporarily homeless for a period. Was I working at RPCP? I'm like doing great shit on the outside, but I didn't have a place to go. And then my brother opened up his house, and it was just like, it was crazy. I remember like I just sleeping, go there while my kids would be awake, and then just kind of like sleep in my car. And I was at the Walgreens on Tower Road, and I'm like brushing my teeth in the bathroom. And I remember like looking up at myself, and it was just like, I knew in that moment like what love was. Like it was just this wave of love just like came over my heart. And then even over this past year, because I'm hard on myself, like beating myself up, the way I would talk to myself, even just how I was, what I was going through, allowing myself to go through these toxic relationships, just being like, I don't know, just self-aware. And so once I started learning to love myself, like saying no, stepping back, changing my mind. Like I have so many brilliant ideas, like I was doing like so much, and just even changing my mind. So first I did have to learn that for myself, and that has allowed me to apologize. Like I just put on my Facebook this morning, like one of the greatest things I love about myself is that I can acknowledge when I'm wrong and I can apologize.
I would never do that.
Yeah.
Can
you tell him how to do it?
I would never
please?
apologize.
I don't see wrong, Kevin.
There you go.
I just can't
I'll never
see
do
it.
that.
I love that.
I really can't.
The idea that probably all of us have done it from time to time, over identifying with the role that you played. That was one of the most eye-opening experiences for me when I was in prison, because all of a sudden now I'm not a radio host, I'm not a single father, I'm not any of the, I'm not a son, I'm not a brother, I'm not a friend, I'm just me. And I had to figure out who I was. And that experience it's always in the back of my mind now. So when I was a painter, I'm not a painter. When I worked tree work, I'm not tree work. Now I do social work, that I'm not a social worker. I'm not a podcaster. I'm me. And I do these things and they're great and I love them, but I'm me at the end of the day. And I think that's a really difficult life lesson for people, because most of us are running away from who we are. We don't like who we are. So I can identify, I can latch on with this. When someone asks you who you are, the first thing they tell you is where they work,
Yeah,
they never tell you who you are. It sounds like, that's the more important thing for you, is knowing who you are. And the great career play in that is it gives you the freedom to become all these other things.
Absolutely. Even like I haven't worked a job like now, to be honest, in like a year. Like that's also trust and faith.
Can you tell us how to do that? I don't want to work.
Are you hiring?
I had to step out, even with the nonprofit with Leah, I'm proud to say like I'm transitioning to the board. Like I got to this place, like I don't want to be an executive director, but that's all I learned in the justice impacted world. You get in these worlds and then you learn just like kids. People thought I was quiet. Like I'm not quiet. So if you thought I was quiet before, like
you are not quiet.
But most people think I'm quiet, and that goes to show because I was learning. I just come in these spaces. Like I sat back and watched and listened a lot before I just formed my own kind of opinion and started to make these moves. So for me, it's just like I'm just not gonna play into the narrative stuff. And that's how you were saying, like, how do we be successful? Like, how do we create those spaces? Like, even with the Florida Council, the women would come in and they want to just be Miss Jhody. And I started noticing that with even peer-to-peer support. It's like, teach me how to be you. And then like, I could teach you everything I know. You can go do it. And I've learned this because I've gotten mad at some successful people along the way of like modeling, looking at everything they're doing, then modeling that, and then being hurt and disappointed when I didn't get the same outcome. But it wasn't for you to be me. And so that's why I stepped away from, I don't do like social service. Like I'm not the person to call if you need help. Like in that way, like it's just real.
We're gonna isolate that, and that's gonna be the promo.
That's it.
It's Jhody Polk. I'm not the one to call.
I know, answer the phone.
Just kidding. We would not do that.
That's the whole episode. That's short,
But it's neat. Like, and I learned this as a peace builder. The first time I saw the universal needs list, I was at the River Phoenix Center for Peace Building. I've gotten a job, and again, I'll never forget telling them my charges. And then Heart Phoenix looking at me saying, that's why we want you. Like, that's the first time somebody validated that I was just enough. And like, even working there were times where they'd be like, you don't have to ask to go to the bathroom. Like, they provided me the space.
Man.
I've been told that at work. On a number of occasions. You don't have to ask to be in this room.
You don't.
I have to remind myself sometimes, still to this day, when I'm in a store. I was at a Walgreens probably like a month ago, and the sirens were going off, and I was like, what? And then I was like, I'm fucking allowed to be here. I didn't do anything. I'm allowed to be in here right now.
I ain't got over that one yet.
I'm
terrified. I swear to God, like it's so crazy. That's what got me into therapy. Police, like, there's no reason, girl, you just afraid of cops. And so that's why I actually started doing therapy with anxiety. But
Yeah, I
I
cried. I got my
it.
first ticket since I've been home from prison. And the guy actually didn't write me a ticket. And he just like gave me some like warning paper or whatever. And he pulled off and I sat in my car and cried for like a half an hour, like just crocodile tears. It just like brought up how many times I got the shit beat out of me and like, not being listened to and like being told I was lying when I wasn't and thrown in the back of a car. Like all those experiences just came back in this one space. And also it was just a normal traffic stop. So then the other reason I was crying was like, I should not be this fucking upset over it,
Yeah.
but I am.
That triggered all kinds of shit.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Oh man.
That's why having a wide peer group is important. And I just got to keep it real. Like my family, because I didn't really bring any friends like from pre-prison. It was almost like that part of my life is really over. And my life started in prison. And then it's like I picked up from when I came home. But like if me and I noticed I would get so frustrated with my family at times. But then I had to recognize this aha moment. Like my mom's never owned a business. Like she's never like, how can she teach me? It was just like this reality. Because a lot of times we can make something feel bad or make it wrong. And it doesn't have to always be wrong or bad. Like there's this spectrum. Like how can I move the needle? And so it was just like really getting to this place of like taking ownership of like there's some things that I didn't know. And it was honestly like my community that's non-justice impacted that would tell me shit like, Jhody, that's normal. Like I would be I freaked out a lot. Like this is the first time I've had emotional freedom. I've gone from spiritual freedom, physical freedom. This year I've really stepped into 2022 with emotional freedom. Like I could feel my feelings and they make me human. They don't drive me to like some of these other just doesn't hinder me, right? From just taking leaps and stepping out. But it was really these connections with people that don't look like me, that don't come from where I come from. And then when like I see like, oh shit, like white people do drugs or
what?
I did not know white people smoke weed or did any of. I felt bad. Like,
hey, you're hanging out with the wrong white people.
I didn't know until I started hanging around. I had no relationships. With like white people or just like parenting. I have a lot of like successful people that I know now from the work that I do. And like I would beat myself up as a bad parent. And then I talk to someone who's like the big founder, this, that. And it's like, no, like that's, like what parents go through. So like normalizing, like life is a flow. I kept waiting for it to just be like this.
Yeah.
But that's not the truth.
Yeah, we've talked about that me personally, I had a linear narrative. I was like beginning, middle, end.
Yeah.
I got interrupted. Now I'm going to come home and it's going to be the ending to this great. This is why everything happened.
So smooth.
Was it all happened so that I could lead to this moment. And it wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't because of that. I mean, I've written 15 chapters since then. Life is like this so often. It's not rags to riches. It's rags to riches to rags to riches.
Rags to riches.
I mean, it's just been one endlessly smooth
giant rag.
The entire time.
It's all rags.
You are.
It's one nightmare after another.
Jhody, as we wrap up here, what's next for you? Like what's coming up?
The presidency, the White House.
I would hope so.
President
Polk. We've done it before, although he was killed. So yeah.
I'm actually willing to die for my dreams. Like I really am. But I plan on running for mayor for Gainesville, like within the next 5 years, which was crazy because I've been working on my sleeve. Yeah.
My best friend ran for mayor here. Yeah, you probably know Jen. Do you know Jen Powell?
It's when you said Jen, I started to say, which Jen?
Yeah.
She was a part of my rap, like coming into like Jen was a part of community, like me having that. I had to really build that for myself. So I'm proud of her.
Yeah.
I want to disrupt the system by, again, like modeling, being a part of it, run for mayor, get to the Senate, one day to the presidency. But right now, what I'm really looking forward to is locally. Like, I'm just very proud of you and Tequila and just what Torchlighters is. Like, I've hoped for a lot of things and I gotten depressed, like feeling like it was me all by myself. And where I'm at now, like there's so many amazing things that are happening. I don't have to be like the leader of the followers. So like I'm excited to be in community. Like I am
Nice.
enough.
Yeah.
So like really getting involved. And I've been wide and big. Like I do a lot of influencing globally and whatnot or whatever, but like it's time to bring it, you know, home. So I'm looking forward to
We're very lucky for that.
yes,
Yeah.
like being a part of Gainesville. Like I'm the watchdog. I'm a watchman county to be
Yeah.
here. And also like creating some online space. Like I'm really into the shadow work, tarot, living up other spiritual practices, giving people the opportunity to like be okay after we fuck up and fail and just,
Yeah.
you know, be that support, a light in the valley, you know. So that's what I'm planning on doing, just living my
Nice.
life.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I feel like we could talk to you for like 8 hours.
I
Yeah.
Like, there's like not enough
We
time.
do like 5 more shows. I'm
Yeah.
replacing you.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I was sorry on you, Reed.
Yeah. Done. All right, Kevin.
Every week,
Every-
it'll keep growing.
The
So we have,
show-
like 10 people.
Yeah. We just have like a permanent co-host. Yeah.
It's gonna keep
No,
growing.
you guys keep doing it, keep inviting us. One of the things I must say is I'll never forget the people that invited me into space before I was Jhody Polk.
Mm.
You know, I was doing a lot of stuff. Like it's just kind of these last 3 years, but I think anybody that has survived and kind of come through that and they're now home, like I've always been, I don't care if you did 1 year, 10 year, 5 years, whatever. The universe knows what you need, what you want. So the more we can come in here and do this, like I'm so thankful for this space. Incarcerated, like I think this is just so timely. And so like the more we just keep doing this, like there's times where I can go left, but I can at least think of you. Like I don't always, sometimes I have to pick up the phone and call you, but sometimes just knowing
Yeah.
that you're there, like even that I could hurt Kevin. Like there's a lot of times I could easily hurt myself and be okay with that. But like I don't ever want to hurt you.
Thank you.
I don't ever want to hurt my family. I don't want to hurt like there's so many
Yeah.
people, you know, that I'm connected to. So let's keep building those connections and like celebrating each other, even if it's just like out of bed today. Like you gotta celebrate.
Yeah.
I will say one of the things as we've been talking, I've known this for a long time, but as we've been talking, especially like the last hour, whatever it is, like I fucking love Jhody Polk, of course, but like I fucking love Jhody. Like Jhody is like fucking what a great human being.
Yeah.
You know what I
Seriously.
mean? Like accolades, achievements, fucking awesome. But like separate from all that, like what a just an outstanding human being.
Absolutely.
And like so
Thank you.
authentic and like real. And like when shit's rough, it's fucking rough. When it's great, it's great. Like I feel like you're just like really living an authentic life. And it's really
Yes.
beautiful.
That's 2 weeks in a row
to
that
be in
the
your company.
presence in the room was just a light.
Yeah,
I guess
for
last
real.
week the same
Yeah.
deal.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree completely.
So-
Yeah. Amazing.
Yes.
Come back again.
I
Yeah,
will.
please do.
Like 500, 700
Absolutely.
times.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Mayor Polk.
Yeah. Mayor Polk.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us on Uncarcerated.